Have you ever planted peonies and wondered why are these not blooming? Or have you ever wondered how should I plant these peonies anyway? Well, today I'm going to show you exactly how I plant peonies on my cut flower farm. I'm Ruth Ann from Abundant Blooms Flower Farm in West Michigan. I'm finishing my 6th season of flower farming, and I am full on planting for my 7th season. I am going to be planting some peonies today, and I have about 400 peonies on my farm, the first of which were planted in 2020, and I've slowly added more over the years. And I sell almost exclusively to florists. So in this video, I'm going to cover when to plant peonies, how deep to plant them, what to avoid, and a couple different methods of actually planting them as far as like weed prevention that I've used on my farm. And I hope that helps you. So let's just dive right in. So when you get your peonies, they're going to look like this. These are bare roots, and they have these little eyes on them. And so that's what you're going to be planting. And the best time to plant them is the fall, which it's fall right now in West Michigan. So right now is a great time to plant your peonies. You can plant them until you can't work the soil anymore. At least that's the case for us in Michigan. If you don't freeze, you'd probably want to plant them sooner than later. But for us, as long as we get them planted before Christmas, if that's even still possible, we're good to go. We'll still get plenty of cooling. So it is the beginning of November right now, and that's when I'm going to be planting them. But you can plant them anywhere until you can't, dig in the soil anymore. However, you can also plant peonies in the spring. And so if you're able to get plants in the spring, it's better than waiting till fall. But the ideal time to plant is the fall, just like now. Plant them as soon as you can. There's no need to wait. I wouldn't plant them in the summer, but spring or fall. Couple of tips. If you have heavy clay soil when you're planting them, you can mix in compost or sand and try and give yourself some better soil for drainage. Make sure that they're in full sun. If you don't plant your peonies in full sun, you're going to wonder why they're not blooming. Full sun is really key. So where can you plant peonies as far as like where in the world can you plant them? Well, they're hardy from zone 3 to 8. The colder actually the better. I used to live in Alaska where it's very cold, and they have a lot of really large peony farms there because peonies love Alaska. Now, yes, they bloom later in Alaska than they do here in the lower 48, but they grow super well in Alaska. You're going to have a harder time in zone 8 than in zone 3 because they have to have enough cooling and they don't love those warm temperatures. So where I live in Michigan in zone 6A, they love it here. Love it. Love it here. Nice and cold in the winter. They still have plenty of growing time. So the biggest mistake typically in planting peonies is that people plant them too deeply. I'm going to show you exactly how I plant them, but these are the eyes of the peonies, and you want the highest eye to be about 1 inch below the soil. So you would plant it like this, not like this. You plant it like this, and then you want to make sure you do not plant it too deeply. One of the most common questions that I get is, why isn't my peony blooming? Well, it's probably for one of 2 reasons. 1, it's in the shade. It doesn't like to be in the shade. It's not happy in the shade. Or 2, it's planted too deeply. Or you've continued to mulch it over time, and so it maybe used to be planted at 1 inch, but every spring you're putting wood chips on it, and now it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. So now it won't bloom because it's planted too deeply. So be careful not to mulch it, or if you do mulch it in the summertime for weed prevention, in the fall, pull those wood chips away so that your peony plant will be more shallow. There's a couple different of weed prevention methods that I use on my farm. So one of them is here that I'm standing in front of, and this is what I call planting, I don't know what I call it, but it's planting 2 rows in a 3-foot wide bed, and you use landscape fabric to cover the whole thing. You plant them every 18 inches alternating. You can see that there's, they're alternating down the row. This is how I initially started planting them. I'm actually standing in my initial peony planting. I had part of my initial order canceled, and so I actually never finished filling out this space. And so I just have some space here, half a bed that I've been using for other things, but this year I'm gonna finally finish out this section. This is how I first did it in 2020. I've had fabric on here since 2020. Since then, I've done one other method. The other method that I've used is that instead of planting them in landscape fabric, I put landscape fabric down as the pathway, and I leave a 12-inch bare strip of soil. So I'll do like 3 feet of landscape fabric, 12-inch strip of soil, and then another 3 feet of landscape fabric. And then that 12-inch strip is completely open. And then I plant my peonies every 24 inches down the row in that 12-inch strip. And then between the peonies, I often will cut cardboard strips, like rectangles, and then mulch in between them. Otherwise, you do really get a lot of weeds in year 1 and in year 2. Beyond that, once you're in year 3, 4, 5, like your peony plants are really going to outshade and overcrowd the weeds, and they're not as big of a problem. But in the first 2 years, there really is a lot of weeding. Actually, there's weeding no matter what method you use, but I just feel like that is just a little bit more, I don't know, I've just preferred that method. So that's what I typically do, even though I'm planting a new row like this because this already was set up that way. Both setups really work fine. It just depends on what method you would prefer. If you want to use landscape fabric and kind of like maybe your situation. But I prefer the second method where it's just a 12-inch open strip. They just seem a little easier to maintain once they're established. Okay, soil and water needs. So another important thing is peonies don't like wet feet, or if you plant them in where they're going to have a lot of standing water, they're probably going to rot out. So you don't want to do that. They don't want to be boggy, particularly over the winter and in the summer. And these are actually a little bit of raised beds here. This is kind of a wet area, but because we have the raised beds, they seem to do okay. That works, but just know if you're getting washed out, your peonies might rot out and not like that. They like well-drained soil. So just a few quick things about planting and kind of like growth habit of peonies really briefly. So peonies take several years to establish. They're a perennial that you cut all the way back to the base every fall, which I've already done. And in the spring, they send up brand new shoots from the new eyes that have grown from in the previous year. So in July and August, they're setting eyes for the next year's growth. So you want to make sure you keep your peonies watered in July and August, even though they don't really seem to be doing much, and your plant itself will probably look relatively healthy. It might not be producing eyes for the next year if it's stressed. So I make sure that I water my peonies all through the end of the season. So in year 1, you usually just get a little bit of foliage. It's usually not super robust. There's maybe 5 shoots from it, and there's almost never a bud or a bloom. I almost never have seen a bloom. And like I said, I've grown almost 400 peony plants, and in the first year, so the first year meaning I plant them now in the fall. Next year, in 2026, I probably will not see one single bud or bloom from these brand new plants. In year 2, typically you can tell that the plant is beefing up a little bit and becoming more robust, and typically you will have some blooms. 3 to 5, typically. Now, as a flower farmer, I disbud those second year blooms. That means I just pinch them off right at the top so that there's all kinds of foliage, because the foliage is what's going to send energy into the roots of the plant to make it a more robust, healthier root system for the following years. I have cut and sold those blooms, or like if the plant looks really healthy and it sends up 5 shoots, I might cut 2 of them. But since I've continued in flower farming, those second year peonies are just so inferior to your 3rd, 4th, and 5th year peony plants. Those peonies just have a lot bigger blooms and just are so much more robust. And so I have just opted to wait typically. Now there's kind of a dispute about this in the flower farming world. Some people say you should disbud your peonies for 5 years. Well, I haven't really found that to be the case. Yes, are you going to get a more robust root system? You are. However, you could be making $2.50 or $3 a stem wholesale on those plants in the meantime. And 5 years is a really long time to wait for an investment for, I don't know how, I have plants that I've cut off of every bud off of a 3rd year plant, and they're super healthy, robust plants sending up 25 and 30 shoots in their 4th year. So I don't think I'm ruining them. Dave Dallion says that's how he does it. And so that's kind of what I go along with. There's also people that say, no, cut every single peony off your 2-year peony plant. Well, I'm also not really in that camp, but you can try it and see what works for you. So year 3 is when I would say you're going to have a strong plant typically that's going to give you some strong, robust buds that you'll really be able to harvest and sell off of. And then after that, peonies just get better and better. Actually, they can live for 100 years and they just keep sending up more and more shoots. You actually never have to divide them, like a lot of perennials will start to become overcrowded and have to be divided, or they'll stop sending up as many blooms, or they'll send up no blooms, or they'll get diseased if you don't divide them. But peonies are actually not that kind of a crop. If you can plant them where they're happy and leave them, you actually never have to divide them. You can, but you do not have to. So that's kind of a nice thing about peonies as a perennial. Since I sell mostly to florists, I just choose to not sell those second year plants typically. And if you're interested in selling to florists, I have a free download called Selling Flowers to Florists, and I'd love it if you would download that. If you're interested in selling flowers to florists, you'll find that link in the description below. So today I'm going to be planting Elsa Sass peonies, which are those roots that I was telling you about. Also, another thing, when you're buying roots, you want to buy the roots that have the most eyes. You'll see when you're purchasing them, they'll say like 2 to 3 eyes, which will be cheaper. And then you'll see something that says like 3 to 5 eyes or 5 to 7 eyes. Personally, I like to buy the ones with more eyes. I was just looking at these roots and they're 5 to 7 eyes. And on that one root, I counted 10 eyes on it. That's a really great peony root. The more eyes there are on the peony plant, the bigger and better and the more robust it will be for you. So that's what you want. You want them to have more eyes because they'll give you a more robust plant. So I'm planting Elsa Sass. It's a new variety to me. I've never grown it before. It's a white. I actually got these from Farmer Bailey. I often get my peonies from Ball Seed. It's a wholesale bulb peony seed plug company, but this time these are from Farmer Bailey. It's a later white bloomer. So I currently grow another white variety called Duchess de Nemours, which I love. Duchess de Nemours, they're so beautiful and they're really great peony. But I get most requests for white peonies. Since I sell direct to florists, and I sell to a lot of wedding and event designer florists, and they really want white peonies. So this is a later blooming white peony. So I'm really excited to add this to my repertoire here, bringing my total count of peonies to just 400 or 410, something like that. And if you want to know more nitty gritty about how I sell to florists, I have a course called Selling Flowers to Florists where I really deep dive into the whole roadmap of how I sell to florists, how I get my first florist all the way to like continuing relations, what crops to grow, how to communicate with them and all that. So if you're looking for a really deep dive into that, you can check out my course as well. So other than that, I have several other videos about growing peonies and kind of more overview of peonies, harvesting them, selling them, and growing them for profit. So check out those videos. I'll link to them as well. And I'd love to know, do you have a favorite cut flower peony? I certainly have not grown them all, but I'd love to know if you have one. And that's it for today, friends. I hope that this gave you confidence about how to plant your bare root peonies this fall. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Until next time, keep pressing on in this flower farming journey. We're all going to make it till the snow flies, which for me might be on Monday. So I got to get these planted.